How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is RuffledRowlit and welcome back to a brand new video. Today, guys, we're going to be taking a look at the worst starter Pokemon, or the single worst starter Pokemon out of every single region and generation of Pokemon. Now, before we get started, I'm going to make sure to point out a few things. The first thing is first, this is based on my own opinion and just overall thoughts about these Pokemon, whether it has to be with their design or it has to be with the actual Pokemon and how the Pokemon performs in battles and how it works against the early gyms. I will not be taking a look at the actual final evolutions and stuff because I feel like if we go into that, it's kind of a different sort of video. I'm talking about the first evolutions of these Pokemon, but I will also mention their evolutions and how they change and how they may become better as they evolve or worse or whatever. But still, I hope you guys enjoy this video. Keep in mind, this is based on my own opinion. If you do not agree, let me know in the comment section down below. Please do not flame. Let's just have a nice conversation down there and let me know what you guys think are the worst ones instead. So let's start with Generation 1 first. Now, I've got to say for Kanto, it's a very hard question here, as I'm really stuck between Charmander and Squirtle, and let me explain why. I'm basing this mainly off of these Pokemon in the start, like as you play with them in the certain region, which for the Kanto region, you would have, you know, Charmander, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle. We're basing it off of those regions and their gyms, so we're not basing this off of the overall quality of these starter Pokemon. We're basing them off of where they are from. So if you look at Charmander and Squirtle, they are honestly the worst starters to start off with. And the reason why is because, first of all, Charmander is totally useless against gyms. Let's be fair. It learns Scratch, Growl, and Ember, as far as I remember, up until level 7, then at level 10 it's Smokescreen, and then, you know, at level 16 it's Dragon Rage and stuff. But honestly, in the start, it is very hard to do anything with Charmander against Brock and against Misty. You're pretty much weak, and even when you evolve it into Charmeleon, you're still gonna struggle because you're up against a Rock-type gym, and you're also up against a Water-type gym afterwards. So honestly, just undoubtedly, Charmander is, hypothetically speaking, the worst starter from Gen 1 because it's so hard to get through with Charmander. But of course, you know, once you evolve it into Charmeleon and then eventually to Charizard, it becomes way better and some of the strongest you've ever seen. Like, it straight up is super strong at that point. But honestly, when you start off with Charmander as a base Pokemon, it is the worst. It is just straight up the worst. It is weak. It is not effective against the two first gyms. And the only thing it's really effective against is Bug-type Pokemon in the forest. That's literally it, dude. Just getting through those Metapods, those Kakunas, those Caterpies, those Weedles. That's literally all it's good for. Everything beyond that, it really struggles against. So I would definitely not recommend this if you're starting Pokemon. I mean, if you still want to take Charmander, it's still fine. It's just going to take you a bit of grinding to get to the point where you can take on Brock and Misty without any issues. Or you're just going to have to catch yourself a few Pokemon and stuff. But just undoubtedly, Charmander is the worst one, as it's very weak in the Kanto region, at least in the games, in, you know, Fire Red, Leaf Green, and Pokemon Blue and Red and such. But either way, that's going to be that one. Let's go to the next generation. Now, for Generation 2, the worst starter has to be Chikorita, and I think this is kind of universally accepted, and the reason why is Chikorita is just not a good option when you have Totodile and Cyndaquil. And I mean, I personally have Totodile and Cyndaquil as my favorite starter Pokemon of all time. I love both of them equally, so when I'm given the option between those two and then Chikorita, I'm clearly going to take one of those instead of Chikorita. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Chikorita's design, but even when it evolves, it is still so weak. It is such a weak Pokemon. Like, you never see this thing being used in competitive at all. It is straight up just useless. I mean, I'm not saying this to be mean. I still like Chikorita. I think it's a great Pokemon. Meganium and stuff, like, all these things, like, as it evolves, it still stays weak, especially in terms of competitive stuff. And even as you're playing with it, it's a very weak Pokemon to have in the early stages of the game as you're playing through, you know, Gold, Silver, or Heart Gold, Soul Silver. When you're playing through those, or Crystal even, when you're playing through the games, you're going to struggle a bit with this thing. It's not going to be super hard, but you're going to be struggling a slight bit with it, as it is a bit of a weaker Pokemon to actually have. Now, it could get useful as you evolve it, as it does get stuff like, you know, as you kind of level up, you get Synthesis and Reflect and Magic Leaf and stuff. But again, I don't think these are enough to kind of supplement kind of what you're lacking and what you would have been getting that's better with something like Cyndaquil and something like Totodile as they evolve into Quilava and vice versa and such. You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't be getting the same value essentially from Cyndaquil or from Chikorita, sorry, compared to what you'll be getting from Cyndaquil and Totodile. And that's why I feel like it's a lesser Pokemon and it just doesn't come up to the same level as them, and that's why it's the worst starter from Generation 2. So let's go to the next generation, which is Gen 3. Now for Generation 3, I really had to struggle with like just with the choice, to be honest, and it's really hard to choose one here, but I think as a starter Pokemon, the worst one in the start of the game that you can have is actually Torchic. I was gonna put Trico, but then I realized Trico was actually pretty useful against the first few gyms, against actually the first 2 gyms is actually really useful, while Torchic is not as useful actually. It's very weak against the first 2 things you're gonna encounter, even against the grass, like, not grass, what I'm saying, really just the Pokemon you encounter in the forest or in the, you know, in the wild. You're gonna struggle against those as well. I mean, once you get Ember, it gets a bit easier and stuff, but then again, my point still stands that it is the weakest one in the start. But then again, of course, once you evolve it and such, it gets stronger, especially if you have something like a, you know, speed boost Torchic. That thing is incredibly good. You know, I mean, it used to be. I'm not sure if it's equally as good anymore, but my point still stands that this thing is weak in the start. It is really not that strong in the early game of Pokemon, especially when you're playing in Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, or Oras. Like, when you're playing in those games, you're going to be struggling with this thing, as it is not that strong in the start. It's going to struggle against the first few gyms, and like I said in this video, this is mainly based on how these Pokemon perform in their starter forms. So not when they evolve, but like how they are when they first are, you know, when you first get them. And then once they evolve, that's a totally different story. That's not what this video is for. But overall, I'd say this is definitely the weakest one, as Mudkip and both Mudkip and Trico both have an easier time against the gyms early on, and even the Pokemon in the wild. I think Torchic could also, you know, kind of stand on the same level, but then again, struggles against the gyms, so that's why it comes in on this, you know, kind of low spot here and being the worst one. So that's kind of my overall idea on it. I do love Torchic though. I think all the Gen 3 Pokemon are awesome. I love all the starters. I love Mudkip, I love Trico, and I love Torchic. They're all beautiful, but Torchic just comes in last. Nothing to do with its design or any of that. It's just literally the fact that it's the weaker one out of the rest of them, at least early in the game. So let's go to the next one here, lads, which is Generation 4. Now, for Generation 4, the worst starter has to be Piplup. Okay, so honestly, this thing is just for show. Like, Piplup is useless until it actually evolves. Until you get it to become Empoleon, it is useless. This thing is purely just something to look at. That's really what Piplup is. It's just a purely exclusive water type Pokemon, and it really just doesn't have anything else to it. It just looks nice. That's all it really does. It is weak, and you can literally use another water type to kind of supplement the spot or what like Piplup would be doing for you instead. And it genuinely just doesn't like compare against the Pokemon it's against, and honestly it just falls flat in my opinion, and that's why it is here on this worst list here, and that's why I think it is the worst one, because honestly it just doesn't really bring anything to the table compared to Turtwig and Chimchar. Even though Turtwig also struggles to a fair amount, let's be fair, it does struggle a lot, it still doesn't struggle as much as Piplup, because Piplup, it literally is just useless for the longest of times, and also will struggle, you know, a fair bit against gyms and such. You're gonna have a bit of trouble here and there. I mean, it's not gonna be super hard, but you're gonna struggle itsy bitsy bit. You're gonna be struggling with it, at least a tiny bit. So honestly, that's why it's on this list here, and that's why I think it's one of the worst ones, because it just has overall bad stats, and it's really not a good Pokemon just to use early in the game. I definitely recommend Chimchar or Turtwig over it. Definitely 100%, so that's why it's on this list. Let's go to the next one, which is going to be Generation 5. Now, for Generation 5, the worst one has to be Oshawott. Now, the reason for this is two reasons. One, the design. I am just not a big fan of the otter design, like the sea otter thing. I don't like it too much. I don't think it's too interesting. I kind of find it boring and just not a cool Pokemon. And I'm really annoyed by this Pokemon because of the anime, because it was such an annoying Pokemon in the anime, and that's why I don't like it at all. But beyond that, it is purely a water type Pokemon. Even when it evolves, it still remains a water type Pokemon. It never gets a dual typing, and that's why I feel like it definitely is a Pokemon you want to avoid as your starter. It's just there's no reason for using it. It doesn't have anything special about it. Its move pool really doesn't have anything in there that like is super special or can really help you out or is really useful. There's nothing in there that can specifically help you out a lot. Like, it's really not that useful. Like, straight up, I'm gonna be honest, it's really not that useful. It's a very weak Pokemon and just a weak choice to take, if I'm gonna be honest. It's not one that I would actually recommend myself, as I find it to be kind of the lesser of the other options. It falls flat in my opinion, so that's why it's on this list. So let's go to Generation 6, ladies and gentlemen. Now for Generation 6, we're going to be having Fennekin. Now, I've got to say, Fennekin is a starter I choose, and the one I like, but the problem is, its moveset is very one-sided and really not like... There's really nothing there that can be super useful to you in the early game, but as it evolves, it actually turns useful. I mean, Delphox is fantastic, but Fennekin isn't as fantastic. It really can have a struggle in early game until you eventually evolve it. It really will struggle a tad bit, so that's why it is on here. That's why I feel like, I mean, this has nothing to do with its design. It is a beautiful Pokemon. I think it's super adorable. It's great, but it's literally to do with the fact that it just struggles a lot in the start, and comparing it to its, Froakie and such, it really isn't like an option that I'd rather avoid. Like, especially in early game, I'd rather have something like Froakie, but I wouldn't mind having a Delphox in late game. I mean, of course, Greninja's badass and all, but I would not mind having a Delphox, though it does struggle, as Fennekin in early game, and it's got a very one-sided kind of moveset and like move pool and such, so it does struggle a lot, and that's why it's on this list. So let's go to the final generation, Generation 7, lads. Let's get right into it. And finally, for the Generation 7, the worst starter has got to be Rowlet, and the reason why is, Rowlet has a decent moveset in the start. There's nothing wrong with the moveset, but this thing becomes very weak later into the game. I mean, Rowlet is straight up just not comparable to Litten and Popplio. I mean, Popplio is Water Fairy, which is insanely good, and you got Fire Dark on freaking Litten. Those just work out really nice, but Rowlet is Grass Ghost. And honestly, it is not that strong. It is kind of weak. I mean, it's useful in the early battles against your rival, when you're taking on How and such. Yeah, sure, that's kind of straightforward. You're supposed to kind of win those battles. But as you kind of progress, you'll notice that you will struggle a tad bit with it, as it is kind of weak against a few first things you're going to have to deal with, with the island challenges and stuff. You're going to have to struggle a bit with specifically Rowlet, and it definitely is the weakest one, as when it evolves, it becomes the weakest one in typing wise. So that's literally it. There's nothing to do with design. I mean, I'm RuffledRowlit, that's my channel name, and I'm putting Rowlet as the worst Gen 7 or Generation 7 Alola Pokemon starter, and that's literally just the truth. That's what it is. So I'm gonna accept that fact. I know it hurts my soul saying it, but that's just how it is, and that's where it comes in on this list. So that's gonna be the end of this video, guys. Let me know what you think about this list here that we created today. If you guys did enjoy the video, make sure to let me know in the comment section down below. If you do not agree with me, let me know why, and I would love to just hear it from you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see more videos like this one, let me know in the comment section, and make sure to drop a like down below if you want to see more, and subscribe for future videos. I'll see you all the next time. Have a great day, and bye bye, ladies and gentlemen.